This is your Friday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Going to talk Twins here in a little bit. You guys, I got Megan Ryan on the show today. I wish under better circumstances. This is like 2 shows in a row where she's come on and they've been absolutely miserable right before her appearance. They are 12-23 right now. Any way you slice it, that's not good. But that happens to be the worst record in baseball now. Swept by the White Sox. The Tigers, I believe, swept the Royals in the same time span, so the Tigers are now a game ahead of the Twins. And nobody else in the majors is worse than that. So that is something the Twins are wearing right now as they come home for some other tough home games now against Oakland and, again, the White Sox. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll talk to Megan Ryan, Twins beat writer, about that in just a minute. But first, what did I miss? Well, the Wild playoff matchup is set. We've been waiting for a long time to figure out where they're going to slot in, who they're going to play, what the more favorable matchup is. And the Wild finished their regular season on Thursday night, a game that didn't matter at all to them. A weird game. They got up to a 3-0 lead at St. Louis, which also didn't have anything to play for other than momentum going into the playoffs. And St. Louis, been really good lately. The team that's, even though they're the 4 seed, you got to take them seriously as well, because I think I looked it up. They're like 9-3-2. In their last 14 games against Minnesota, Colorado, and Vegas. And a lot of that damage done against the Wild because they played a lot of games against them late in the season. But that game didn't matter much, right? That didn't matter in the seeding at all. It was just a 7-3, though, because St. Louis scores all 7 of its goals kind of consecutively after the Wild jumped out of that 3-0 lead. But the big game on Thursday was Colorado going to beat LA, which it seemed likely given that LA was, just wants this season over. And it was a kind of it turned out to be a rout 5-1. So what that means now is Colorado wins the division. They leapfrog Vegas on the last day. Vegas falls down to the number 2 seed. Wild, as the number 3 seed, will open the playoffs at Vegas 2 p.m. Sunday. Best of 7 series. And, we've talked about this with Sarah McClellan on the show before, but Vegas certainly the more, at least on paper and at least based on results this season, the more favorable matchup. Neither Colorado nor Vegas is an easy matchup. They're both, way up there in points percentage, as the Wild is too. The Wild's way up there in the NHL in points percentage too. Like in a normal year, if we just give the Wild the same points percentage, even though they probably, earned it by beating up on the teams that were below them in the division in this strange schedule, they would have been a top 4 seed in a normal season based on their points percentage, and would have gotten, probably into one of those home ice situations. But they start on the road. Vegas, though, a team they've played well this year. They're 5-3 against Vegas this season, including 4-1 in games decided in regulation. There's a few other games that went to overtime shootouts, and in those games obviously will be different in the playoffs. No 3-on-3, no shootout in the playoffs. You play till someone scores, kind of the old-fashioned way. 3 of those 4 wins for the Wild in the regular season. In regulation, though, were 1-goal wins. So this could be a good close series. I really think so. I mean, that's all you can really ask for. I think Vegas probably comes in with a slight edge just because they have the home ice, because they've got the playoff experience as this group to go in and do it. But this is certainly a matchup the Wild can win. And so it sets up a weird kind of dynamic where you look at it on paper, you're like, okay, they have a realistic chance of winning this series, so is it a disappointment if they don't? And it's going to be an interesting to see how it gets framed if they lose. I'm not saying they're going to lose. I think they have like I said, I think they have a real chance of winning this series. And I think there's a real chance once they get past this series, if they do, that they could go even further because A, you get the momentum from winning a series. B, I don't think it's a slam dunk that, Colorado or St. Louis emerges from that series. So if it's St. Louis, even though the Wild's had trouble against the Blues this year, Wild would have home ice for that series, would have some momentum going. And even if it is Colorado, the Wild played Colorado better as the season went along. So the chance for a playoff run, it's about all you can ask for. Kirill Kaprizov, get to see him in the playoffs, get to see, fans in the stands, at least, in a limited capacity for this postseason series. looking forward to it. It's just fun to have real playoff hockey back. Low expectations for the Wild going into this season, and all of a sudden, look at where they are right now. I got to talk about the Wolves a little bit too. They played Denver on Thursday night. The Wolves have been playing a bunch of games in a row that didn't necessarily matter all that much. They played Orlando and Detroit, two teams that are on the opposite end of the spectrum of the playoffs. Denver, though, a team that has a lot to play for, even though they rested Michael Porter Jr. on Thursday, because they've got some other games down the stretch they're trying to prepare for. Nikola Jokic was in there. Plenty of other good players in the mix as well. Aaron Gordon was in there. JaVale McGee, and those three kind of exposed the flaw that still exists on this roster, that the Wolves just don't have all that much size down low. And Karl-Anthony Towns kind of got shoved around a little bit on Thursday night's game. He kind of got upset. He kind of took him out of the game emotionally, and this happens still to Towns. This is one of my biggest concerns about Towns is not his leadership. I think he's got that leadership piece off the court, but in games, I think he still has a lot to work on in terms of his maturity, in terms of how he reacts to adversity. And I don't think he reacted well to adversity in Thursday's game. Anthony Edwards was great. He's been great lately. He's been their most efficient player in a lot of games, but Towns in this matchup with Jokic goes 6 for 18, gets 20 points, 11 rebounds, so the counting stats look okay at the end of the day, but Jokic winds up with 31 points, 14 rebounds on 14 of 21 shooting. And that's the difference in the game in a 114-103 loss. So there you go. That's just, they don't have the size, when they're playing, you're playing a lot of Jaden McDaniels still at the 4 sometimes, even Jared Vanderbilt, not the size to contend with a Jokic and a JaVale McGee and an Aaron Gordon. When your front line is your starting front line is Jared Vanderbilt, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards was checking Aaron Gordon a lot, and that's just not a fair size matchup. Maybe it works for Ant in terms of quickness on the other end of the floor, but you're going to get swallowed whole on the offensive glass, as they did, because McGee and Jokic had 11 combined offensive rebounds. So it just reinforces the need to address power forward in the offseason and, frankly, for Towns to take another step forward when it comes to maturity, because if they want to be the team they think they can be, this is the kind of game they're going to play next season, games that mean something, games that matter against good teams, and they need to be in a better position to win those games than they were on Thursday night.
I'm Nyla Jean Myers, Senior Assistant Sports Editor at the Star Tribune. Thank you for listening to Strip Sports Daily Delivery. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast and our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Megan Ryan covers the Twins back here on Daily Delivery. Megan, we got to stop meeting like this, because I believe the last time you were on, it was after that road series in Oakland, which we thought was going to be maybe a low point in the season. Surprise! Things have continued to get maybe perhaps even worse. Swept by the White Sox, 12-23, 10 games back of first place. Wow. Don't know what else to say except not great, Megan. What can you tell me about this series and where things stand for this team that I don't even know where to begin, but 12-23. How is the post game mood? And would you even know? Because apparently, like you told me, they really only make Rocco Baldelli and the starting pitcher from the game available after the game, which to me is ridiculous. But that's my fight. That's my fight right now, not yours.
Randball media columnist for the Star Tribune.
Right? This is ridiculous. You leave how many runners on base? We don't get to hear from any of the batters. I mean, it's fine. Rocco can speak for it. That's fine. But it's just I think that's. In a normal season, you would have a lot more people available to you. And I think that's a little disingenuous to only have that many people come out. But anyway, that's a media gripe.
It's a tangent, but it's inside baseball. But this is baseball, so we can talk about inside baseball.
It is.
It's tough. It's tough to read the room when you only have Rocco and the starting pitcher, because Rocco tries to address everything. I guess his job is the manager, like he's supposed to kind of speak for the team, but at the same time, it's like, he's just such a nice guy that he is never going to throw anyone under the bus or really kind of allude to any strong feelings about something, which is his prerogative. Like, I think that makes sense. If I were a manager, I would probably do the same thing. So I can't really knock him for that. But then you're really asking like Mike Pineda, like, your team, like, can't score even though you have nothing to do with that. So it is hard. And it's especially hard to read any kind of mood or sense of frustration when it's all over Zoom, right? Because, they can tell you, yeah, we're frustrated, which, like, I guess anybody with a brain could probably assume that. But you don't really get to see, like, it's not like when we could go into the clubhouse and you could see guys like, running out of there with their bags, trying to just get out of the park as fast as they could, or just like sitting in their locker despondent. Like, I don't know. You just don't get to see that stuff. So it's hard. But it's not good. I mean, they're not great. This has not been a good road trip, and I can only assume that it's my fault because my first road trip was not good, and this one certainly has not been good either. So maybe it's me. Phil had a pretty good road trip in Cleveland. I have not had a good road trip yet, so maybe one day.
I'm starting to think it's not you, Megan. It seems like this problem goes deeper than just who is covering this team. Let's do a little recap of the series for anybody who missed it. The Tuesday game, they had 2 off days. Tuesday game is kind of an all systems fail kind of thing where they start off up 3-0, have a nice beginning. You're thinking, okay, maybe this is going to be a turnaround point, but then Kenta Maeda gives it all back in the bottom half of the second, gets pulled after 5. The bullpen falls apart. The offense can't score anymore. There you go. Wednesday's game, offense does its job, but Jay Happ has his worst outing of the year. Bullpen adds a few more, and then it's 13-8, and there's your loss. So when a Thursday's game, it's kind of it's the pitching is fine, I guess. You get through it at least. Pineda gets through 5 and change. The bullpen does an adequate job, but they leave all sorts of runners on base. Chicago's trying to gift them, errors, pass balls, wild pitches, catcher's interference, like any way you can get on base that's weird. The Twins are getting on base, but in the end, it's a 3-2 loss, and that's kind of it. The only interesting thing really that happened, like we were talking about, aside from the losing, is Nelson Cruz had a bucket on his head for a while. Do we have any? I know we couldn't talk to Nelson Cruz, or weren't able to talk to Nelson Cruz. What's the bucket all about?
It was a cooler, Rand, you uncultured swine.
Okay, my bad. It's a cooler. Yes, the cooler.
It was an orange Cape cooler. I don't know. I saw him wear it. Well, like, it was on the broadcast too, so people at home probably saw it as well. But he, like, sometime in the 4th inning, I think this was after Larnach had scored from like when Kepler reached on one of those errors. So they were down 2-1 at the time, and then all of a sudden, like, you look at the dugout, and Nelson Cruz is like a cooler on his head, like a Gatorade cooler that I assume like was filled with like sports drinks and ice. I don't really, unless it was empty, I'm not sure why you would have that in the dugout, but he took it and emptied it out and put it on his head as a hat. I'm not really sure. But when I asked Rocco about it after the game, he said, he alluded to, like, they've done things in the past that have spurred them, which, like, I assume is talking about like the 2020 robes, if anybody remembers.
Robes, the Josh Donaldson robes. Those
the
were
robes,
big.
the Josh Donaldson robes, those are big. And so I think this was like Nelson's attempt of like trying to do something dumb and spur his team to greatness. It didn't quite work out for him. I think they loaded the bases in that after he had done that, but then obviously didn't bring anyone home because they were 0 for 10, I think, with runners in scoring position this game. Yeah. So left 12 on. So it didn't work. But tune in on Friday to see what Nelson Cruz puts on his body next. That may or may not help the Twins win.
Well, they've clearly not given up. You can see evidence of a fight in this team. So you sense that they still believe to a certain degree, but I got to say, I saw a tweet. I think it was a Baseball Reference tweet, a Stathead tweet. History at this point is not on their side. The tweet was basically in the wild card era, which is since 1995. So we're talking about a quarter century of history now. Only one team that has started this poorly through 35 games has made the playoffs, has made the postseason. And that was the 2005 Astros, who actually went to the World Series. So if that's the good news, the bad news, if you're a Twins fan, is that Astros team had Craig Biggio and three starting pitchers named Roy Oswalt, Roger Clemens, and Andy Pettitte. So no slander to Kenta Maeda, Jose Barrios, and Michael Pineda, but I don't know if the Twins front three is quite of that caliber. So the Houston Astros at that point had the rotation, had the lineup maybe to peel off winning streaks. I just don't see how this team, as it's constructed right now, will be able to put together the kinds of 8 out of 10, 7 out of 9, even 5 out of 7 that's going to kind of chip away at this deficit. But maybe it's just a matter of one at a time. I don't know. What do you think as you look out at the landscape of this team? Where is there even a sign that there could be a turnaround?
Well, if you wanted to point to a sign, I mean, like, I guess you could look at Jorge Polanco. Obviously, he was one of those guys that had a really good 2019 season and then kind of hasn't been very good since. But he's quietly the past several games. Like, I think he had a hit today, but he had a double today. But I think the last 4 games before this game, he had it was a multi-hit game for him, which is unusual for Jorge Polanco in the last year and a half or so. So he's been kind of quietly getting better, or maybe getting out of his funk, or maybe returning to that form. It's a little bit too soon, but I mean, just from what I've seen these last couple of games, he looks like when he comes up on base, or comes up at the plate, that he's going to do something with it. So if that can happen, I mean, anything can happen. Right, if he can turn it around, then hypothetically, so can Kepler, so can Sano, all of those kinds of guys. So that's a semblance of hope, I guess. I think another way, Rocco said after the game, obviously it's frustrating and they know that it's wrong. They know that losing is not good and how they're losing is not good. But they said multiple times that it feels like it's a disconnect, because it's not like they're just a horrible team and there's no hope for them. It's they can pitch well and they can hit well. They just don't ever do it at the same time. Or they maybe do mediocre pitching and mediocre hitting at the same time, but they can't get all the good parts of their game to line up at one time, which obviously is
or they do everything all too well and they win 15-0 and they waste it all in one game. But yeah,
that's true. That has happened once or twice this season, I guess. It feels like a long time ago at this point. So they have done it before, but it's they don't have any sense of consistency with that stuff. And I don't really know how you make those connections, right? Because your pitchers and your hitters are entirely different people, right? So how do you put them on the same page and say, can you please do this thing well while these people do these things well, and can we win a game? So I identify with the fact that is hard, and they're kind of at a loss for that. And Rocco has said he doesn't like to keep hammering home to the players what a hole they're in or how bad they're playing right now or what this might mean in October. It's he doesn't think that that's helpful, so he tries to take it that old cliche, one game at a time, one day at a time. But there's also, I feel a danger in that, is that if you keep your head down and just look on to the next game, you keep losing, and all of a sudden you're going to look up in 2 months and be wow, we've lost 20, 30 games or something in a row. So that's the danger of that thing. But it's hard to measure, because nobody likes to think about how bad they're doing all the time either. I don't think that is necessarily helpful. An interesting thing that I was talking to Thad Levine, general manager, a day or two ago in Chicago here. And the way that he put it was he doesn't think that the team is there yet when it comes to saying let's throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's just a wash. They're not there yet, which is true. It's too early. But the way that he kind of thought of it was, if you look ahead to say, let's even say we're, projecting into trade deadline times or whatever. And, there's going to be, if we were a team that wasn't going to make the playoffs, how many players do you think would be really interested in, or how many teams do you think would be really interested in taking one of our players? And he was you could probably name at least 5 or so, a handful of guys, they would want him or they would want him, we could get something for him. And he was if that's the case though, then you have to ask your question of, if you have that many players, why aren't you a good team? Because you have all of those assets that other people would want that would help their championship team. So why can't you make your team a championship team? Which I think is a good point. And that is the confounding part of this season, is that they do have a lot of pieces that should be really good, but they're not. So Why is that happening? I'm not sure they know the answer. And I certainly don't know the answer, especially over Zoom. I'm not going to get that in-depth stuff, but maybe one day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I read the interview with Thad Levine, general manager of the Twins, and it did seem like what they're kind of counting on or hoping for at this point is that the track record of some of these players that they have that should suggest that things are going to improve, that, you know, a lot has gone wrong for a lot of players at once, whether it's performance, whether it's injury, whether it's even the forces beyond their control, you know, the COVID pause that, you know, probably interrupts some of their timings, you know, it affects their lineup, things like that. You know, they're dealing with a lot of stuff this season that maybe kind of there's a cumulative effect to it that's affecting performance. You know, that said, there is kind of that fine line between not panicking, but also having this urgency where, you know, what's the track record, what's the outlier versus what's the new reality. So, you know, I do wonder kind of where their breaking point. I don't think 35 games is the breaking point. You don't, you know, a team that was supposed to be so much better, that was, you know, not just in their own minds, but in, you know, projection systems, in, you know, what external, you know, national media thought of this team to be like a 90 to 95 win team. When you're suddenly 12-23, you feel like you should be better, and you're probably right about that. The big problem at this point is that even if you are a lot better in, you know, the next 100 and some games, you've got so much ground to make up now that it's going to be hard. You got to play. You got like very little margin for error at this point. So I will be interested to see, you know, if and when they decide, okay, we're turning this around, we want to give this even more time, we think we're on the right track, versus, okay, this just ain't happening. And what's, you know, when do you then decide to kind of enter that, you know, that trade discussion? Because I think you're right. There are some of those players that might be coveted, especially some of the pitchers they have on the staff that are, you know, veterans that are on, you know, last year of their deals that were intentionally kind of signed that way. But, you know, it's a whole conundrum of kind of where they go from here. And it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of reinforcements, because they've kind of used a lot of reinforcements already. Do they hint at all at more? Are there any more AAA moves? Are they exploring, you know, any of trade reinforcements of their own, even if they're minor deals or anything of that nature? Did Thad Levine address anything of that sort?
No, not really. I mean, like the move that happened today was they signed Descalso. If everybody remembers that name. He won a World Series with the Cardinals in 2011. They signed him to a minor league contract today. So, like,
who was that? I missed that name. Who was it?
Descalso. You remember him?
Yeah,
he was on the yeah. So he's like a utility guy. So yeah, but is he going to play for the Twins? I don't. Well, considering they didn't sign him to the actual major league roster, I don't think so.
Right.
But maybe, who's to say? So, I mean, there's not a lot of reinforcements, right? Like the guys that you were looking for, that could have been those, like, you know, prospects coming up were like Alex Kirilloff, who did come up, but then obviously now is injured and might be for, you know, a couple weeks more, hope like a month more. We don't really know. It's kind of unclear with his wrist injury. And then you had, you know, Royce Lewis, but he's been out all season because he slipped on ice and tore his ACL. So like that knocked out your first guy. And then they brought Trevor Larnach up with Buxton hurt. And he's done okay. I mean, actually, he got his first hit last night, and then he got another hit today's game. And so they're both doubles, so maybe he's coming on. But, you know, that's kind of it. So there's not a lot of people you can point to, and certainly pitching wise, like I think actually Royce wrote a column about that fairly recently. That was all about how they don't have a ton of options to go to, and they've tried to. Like they've brought in, you know, Derek Waugh, made his Twins debut, and Sean Anderson made his Twins debut last night too, and it hasn't gone great for those kinds of guys either. So it's a little tough.
Yeah, not a lot of reinforcements on the way. They're kind of, like you said, depending on kind of the internal candidates at this point. You know, the weird thing is, like you kind of said at the beginning, it feels like they can't get things to line up. You know, it's not like they haven't had any starting pitching. I think the starters ERA is at least somewhere in the middle of the pack. You know, the bullpen has faltered at really key moments. They haven't got the clutch hitting. I think they're still getting outscored. Like the stat of the day was like 29-4 in the 9th inning and 10th inning. Maybe it's 29-5 now, because didn't they score one in the 9th inning the other night? So, maybe they're easy. They chipped away at that a little bit, but just, it does feel like the when things are happening is compounding a lot of this. Their run differential is still, close to even. So you can point to a lot of things that should say it could get better. It's just hard to see it at this point. And, a tough homestand they're coming home to. Maybe we'll leave with that thought. I mean, Oakland and then again, the White Sox, 6 games in a row here, not much rest, not much chance to, to do anything except try to keep improving and see if they can get any kind of momentum against 2 really good teams.
Yeah, it's gonna be a tough homestand. I mean, Oakland's got, right now at least, maybe it'll change, but they've got like the best record in baseball, or they're tied for the best record in baseball right now. So like they're doing well, and obviously did well against the Twins during that road trip a little while ago. Chicago, they just are coming off the sweep from them, and now all of a sudden they got to turn around and face them again. So it's like very clear like who's got whose number. You don't really forget that in 3 days. So it's gonna be a really hard homestand, and we've asked this a bit heading into the Chicago series of like, even though it is May and it's only, 35 games or whatever into the season, like, does this not feel like a pivotal stretch because you're going into like 10 games against these American League juggernauts that you were supposed to be up with? And so if you don't take a couple of these games from them, like how big does that make the gap as you head into the rest of the year? And like, it sounds, kind of ridiculous to say that it could, make or break the season at this point, but in some ways it does kind of feel like that, because if they can't take them off now, I mean, you hope that the ebbs and flows of the season and that there's teams that are really hot right now, and then, they'll kind of fade away. And then, teams like the Twins will make a resurgence. That can happen. But if it doesn't, if it just keeps trending like it has, then it's not great. So it's going to be a very interesting home series, but maybe, when they're back home, they're back comfortable. They've, got home fans, and they have more fans coming into the stands here in the next couple weeks too. So maybe all of that makes some kind of shift.
Can't get much worse, but we keep saying that. Well, Megan Ryan, good stuff. Thanks for joining Daily Delivery. Maybe the next time we talk, we'll be talking about something other than utter disappointment and failure from a road trip. But I appreciate you joining nonetheless, and take care. We'll see you down the road. All right.
Thanks, Rand.
Let's end with the cooler. Vikings traded Mike Hughes, 2018 first-round pick, cornerback. Injuries beset his career here. It was a kind of a marginal trade, even with Kansas City getting a slightly better pick, a 6th-round draft pick. Vikings sending out a 7th-round draft pick while also trading Mike Hughes to Kansas City. Last year of his rookie deal, didn't pick up his 5th-year option, didn't figure to be part of their plan going forward. So just a disappointment. And this, I wanted to leave it with this note that they don't have any of their first-round picks now from 2015 to 2018 on their roster anymore. 2015 was Trey Waynes, not on the roster anymore. Signed with the Cincinnati in free agency a year ago. 2016, that was Laquan Treadwell. Definitely a need at that time with wide receiver, but a player that never panned out. Labeled a bust at a certain point. He's trying to get back in the league at this point. 2017, they didn't have a pick because they traded it in the Sam Bradford deal. Sam Bradford obviously not here, so if you're considering that the equivalent, he's not here anymore. And then now Mike Hughes, 2018. So if you're looking for a reason why the Vikings roster has some holes right now, there it is. 4 years in a row, not that long ago, that they no longer have their first-round draft pick. That'll do it for today. Thanks for listening. That'll do it for the week, as a matter of fact. We'll be back next week. Lots of good stuff. Going to be doing a lot of wild playoff talk for sure. I'm sure we'll have Sarah McClellan on maybe more than once to talk about that series with Vegas as it continues. Plenty more good stuff to come as well. Thanks for listening all week, and we will catch you again on Monday.